Welcome back to Sheffield Live. I'm Baillor Jalloh, and if you've just joined us today, we are talking about this book called Journalist on Trial. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it is a privilege and an honor for us to have the author here today. And he is also the editor and founder of Front Page Africa, which is a Liberian newspaper, or a newspaper in Liberia, and it is also one of the best-selling newspapers in the country. So, Mr. Siers, earlier you talked about how ministers or government officials were trying to intimidate and suppress you.
Right.
But that comes to my question again.
Right.
You are one of the most feared journalists in Liberia. You know, you are a very prominent journalist. You've worked for the BBC, you've worked for the New York Times, all these big organizations. So that comes to like this question, as for those who are local, you know, as you will know, someone like you are very difficult to tamper with, if I can put it that way. But looking at the other Liberians or the other ordinary journalists in Liberia who does not have the influence that you have, who does not have the means to contact the BBC, who does not have the means to contact the New York Times and other big organizations like that, how difficult is it for them reporting stories in Liberia?
I mean, the good thing, one of the good things about social media now is that it allows people to tell their story themselves.
Yeah.
So most times, like even the big newspapers in the world, in the Western countries, they see things on social media, Facebook or Twitter, or, you know, and they develop those stories. So I think nowadays, for example, if we had Facebook or Twitter about maybe 20, 30 years ago, a lot of things we see in Africa today wouldn't be happening. Because if a government or a president is doing secret killings, and someone finds a body somewhere they can take a picture and put it on social media nowadays, and people get attention to it. Even the issues that are happening in the places like Cameroon, you know, people are putting those pictures on images on social media. The other day, one of my colleagues in Cameroon sent me some images, and I sent it to the BBC, and they were able to follow up on those stories. So people are using all kinds of techniques now to do this thing. So I think now that we have all these tools available to us, it's good for the practicing profession that we can actually develop these stories for ourselves and help others who cannot do it. So what I tell my colleagues in the media that don't have that, you know, access is that you can always use social media or tell your story through other medium or share with other people, and then you can develop it more.
Okay, if we can just divert our attention for a minute or two regarding this book. You were sentenced when Ellen Johnson Sirleaf was in power, a president whom many people across the world have such a respect for, you know, and the time she came into power, she was regarded as one of the reformers, you know, the person that will respect human rights and that kind of thing. So as a journalist, how will you describe her regime during her term in office, like her 2 terms in office? Because depending who you speak to, I know lots of Liberian friends, or, you know, that I do speak to, some have got negative stories about her. Likewise, there are many also who have got positive stories about her. And in terms of you in general as well, you were arrested during her term.
I think Madam Sirleaf came at a time when Liberia needed some kind of good image. And being the first African head of state was a major accomplishment for any country. So a lot of international donors were willing to help Liberia because of the first female president. And so she got a lot of goodwill. I think her mistake, and much of the things she did wrong, was allowing sycophancy and allowing people around her. Sometimes the people around you who encourage you to do bad things. Most of the problem we have in Africa today with the bad presidents and stuff like that are leaders who allow people around them, the advisors to mislead them. And I think that's what happened to her. And I think if she had been more, she was kind of tolerant to criticism. She was very tough when it comes to criticism. But I think a lot of people around her misled her. And so the bad things you're hearing about her now is because she didn't address those issues when she had the time to do it. So people who did things that, you know, she would just, you know, she would fire them quietly. I mean, she would, like, you know, either suspend them or something, but there was no serious prosecution of people who were involved in corruption. So I think that kind of hurt her image. And the fact that she was hiring her relatives in the government, her sons were in the government in key positions. I think those kind of things really put a dampen her image. And that's why a lot of people, they're not really sure about her. They think that she was a bad president and stuff like that. I don't think she was all bad, but I think she made a lot of mistakes.
Talking of that, though, but do you think the international world, looking at the image that she is, or that she's proclaimed, you know, if I can put it that way, because if you look at, she recently won the Nobel Peace Prize, you know, and that kind of thing. Sometimes the international world, they just look at things when it is in Africa, because it's Africa, they just tend to ignore it, no matter what kind of abuse happens there. Hence, it is a person that they like, or a president that they think is the right person, or that they are dealing with. They tend to ignore all the other negative stories that happen behind closed doors.
I think what it is that when you have someone like Madame Sirleaf, who has a big prominence, who has a big aura, influence around the world, it makes it difficult to really hate her. She's an old lady, you know, she's served 2 terms. I think domestically in the country, a lot of people don't like her. You know, a lot of people think she's a bad president. At the same time, a lot of people think she's a good president. She was a good president, and they like her.
Depending on who you talk to.
Depending on who you talk to. So internationally, her image, all through the 12 years she was in power, she had a pristine international image.
Okay.
Domestically is where the problem came from. I think toward the end of her legacy, her presidency, the world got to see some of the bad things that we would be writing about all along. And I think those things are now coming to light. The problem we're having now in terms of whether her government will be investigated is that she has very close relationship with the current president, the football star George Weah. And she was very influential in helping become president. And he has reportedly promised her that he won't touch she and her family. So people are now beginning to question whether her legacy, if this government is saying that the Ellen Sirleaf government was bad and corrupt, why aren't they investigating her government? That's the debate now in Liberia, and that's what's happening. And whether Mr. Weah is, you know, has the, you know,
the power and means
and the political will to do it is what people are looking at.
It's remained to be seen. Right. Talking of Mr. Weah here, now that we've come into Mr. Weah's government, we've seen recently there has been reports of a $16 billion Liberian dollars missing in the country. And it took time for the president to comment on it. And until recently as well, he commented that there was no money missing. But prior to him commenting, there was a minister who came first and said, no, there's no money that was missing. And another one came out again that said, yes, there is money missing. So what's your take on all that?
I think the government got caught off guard. A total of $16 billion was printed. I think they printed the first $5 billion, and then they printed $11 billion later. The first $5 billion, some of it were used during the Ellen Sirleaf government. I think the $11 billion is the one that's been questioned. Apparently, it was taken from the port and supposed to have been taken to the central bank. Well, it didn't reach the central bank, so that's where the noise is coming from. The central bank has not been able to account for the money to tell the world, yes, we took this money from the port, we brought it to the central bank, this is what we have. They have not been able to do that.
So in your opinion, do you think the president is lying to the public? Because he said there's no money missing.
Well, then the problem they're having now is that there's a serious shortage of local currency in the country. If that money is not missing, then where's the money? You don't see it on the street.
As one of the most respected journalists in the country, what's your opinion on that? Do you think there is any money missing or not?
Definitely money is missing, because the Minister of Information came out and said, yes, we printed money in Lebanon, in China, and other places. So people are saying, but if this money was printed, according to the own government own spokesperson, this money was printed, then where's the money? So definitely the money got missing.
But in this situation as well, there is this catch-22 situation here, because the money was printed between Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's government and the new government, which is George Weah's government.
Right.
So who here is to blame? Because you look at Ellen Johnson Sirleaf, he will tell you, oh, me, I had already packed.
No, she's right.
You know? And you look at George Weah, he will tell you, oh, this money probably went missing before I took power.
She's right. The containers were in the port. They were not taken out of the port until February and March.
This year?
This year.
Okay.
And Weah was inaugurated in January.
In January.
So this money is not Ellen Sirleaf's problem. It's Weah's problem. You see, so Weah cannot escape it. There's the paperwork we all have. The money was signed for in February and March. So Ellen Sirleaf already left office, and Weah was president. So where is the money?
So in terms of the journalists who break the story, I understood there were threats on the journalist. They threatened to lock him up and that kind of thing. He had even death threats. So what's the situation regarding that journalist?
Oh, he's my friend. We talk all the time. And in fact, the reason we didn't break it with him, because we had to see the information, is I wanted to make sure that we contact, the right channels. And he happened to just go ahead of us. But because I've been in prison before, so I want to make sure I had my eyes and my eyes dotted and my T's crossed. Yeah. So when we finally got what information we wanted, we also went with the story. But he's fine. I think he's doing well. He's one of the big media moguls in Liberia. So he's been very, very careful in how he goes out and how he protects himself. But definitely the government is concerned about their image. There's currently an investigation going on about this money missing. And a lot of international press have been on the case. And the government will hope that this thing would die away, but from what I'm hearing from my friends in the media, from people on the ground in Liberia, and even I was a journalist, I mean, I want to see the end. I want to see what's happening to this investigation. I want to see an end game to this investigation. When the investigators are done, the government asked the American government to help them, and they brought in some international investigators to help with the investigation. And the Americans have said that whatever they find, they will make public. So we're all waiting now to see what's going to happen.
And as an investigative journalist, journalism is very difficult in Africa, depending who you support or that kind of thing. But being an investigative journalist is the most difficult one in Africa because you risk your life, doing all the covert stuff that you need to do. So as one of them, how do you feel seeing that you do all the hard work, then you publish a story, and everybody gets to know about this story, be it like, for instance, your story that you did on the minister, and that minister was sacked, but never prosecuted. How do you feel to see you do all the hard work, but then it just goes in vain?
That's the most disappointing part of this job. And during the Ellen Sirleaf government, we exposed a lot of scandals. And the biggest scandal we exposed was something called Knuckles Gate. And Willis Knuckles was a guy who was the Minister of State in the Ellen Sirleaf government. He had promised several companies that if they gave him 10% of their investment, he would guarantee them the concessions in Liberia for mineral concession. And all the discussions between him and those people were captured in emails, which we received. And we published those emails, and the president ordered an investigation. The investigation found that, we didn't make the emails up, that yes, some of the things that were discussed in the emails did happen, and recommendations were made to the president. But she didn't act on the recommendation. So as a result, for example, there was a company called Delta Mining, a South African company. And they were one of the companies that this minister had promised if they gave him 10%, he would. And because of the recommendation, the president went ahead and canceled the contract that Delta had won. And Delta, after a year or two, changed the name from Delta Mining to Sable Mining. And they came back to Liberia with another investment. And last year, before Madam Sirleaf left office, Global Witness put out a report, a damning report, saying that Sable Mining had bribed members of the legislature, and people around the president to have their contracts signed in Liberia. So, if Madam Sirleaf had been more technical with the investigation in the email scandal, she would have had that last-minute baggage that dog came her today, because it really hurt her government image. When that report came out, it was very, very bad on the government. So if she did what she's supposed to do, if she had done what she's supposed to do, she wouldn't have had this problem.
Right. So we've got about 4 to 5 minutes left in today's show. Let's talk about your newspaper here for a bit. How is it doing? Because it was shut down when you were locked up for the trial.
We were shut down for about 3 months during that time. And just this year, when we took over, we were shut down again for a couple of days. So what happens is that I was not in the country. I was traveling to New York for a conference. And when I landed in New York, I got a call that my newspaper had been shut down. So it was like a surprise to me. And we were told that we had published an advertisement in the paper. The same advert was published by other people, other newspapers, but they came after us and shut the paper down and arrested my whole staff and put them in jail. They were freed after, a day or two, and the thing is, the government was very concerned about us as a newspaper, because they knew what we'd done to the early Sirleaf government.
Is this the WIA government?
Yes. Okay. So they were trying to keep us out of circulation, but they didn't have enough information to keep us shut down. So the paper is still surviving. We continue to do good investigative work. We continue to go after sources, after tips. So we still doing what we're supposed to do, I think. We're not going to stop, because Liberia, like any other country in the world, have citizens. And no one wants to be living in poverty the rest of their lives. So our work is to make sure that we go after people who try to take away resources from the country, who try to take away bread from the poor people's mouth, who try to take away livelihood from people who just want to make ends meet. And if we don't do that, then we are betraying those who put their trust in us to do investigative work. And
just briefly, when Mr. Power came into power, there were many hopes in the country, especially with the youth. What has happened to those hopes?
Mr. Weah, I think, had a lot of good people around him. When I say good, I mean like people were really supportive of him. The young people were really behind him.
There were high dreams.
Yeah, and so far in the year now, there have been some disappointments, because a lot of people are still struggling to eat. A lot of people, I think this education year has been the lowest enrollment year for education. The schools are empty because parents cannot support their kids to school. Last week, he announced that university level will be free education, but people are concerned about how he's going to fund that. Because even if the school is free, how do you pay the teachers? How do you pay for lab work? How do you pay for extracurricular activities? All those things need to be put in the context. So it's a very, very difficult game that's going on in Liberia. I hope that those around Mr. Weah will advise him properly. I hope that in the long term, I think we'll see some changes, some tweaks to his government, because the things that are happening now happened before. We've had the likes of Samuel Doe and other people in power, and they misled the country. And we don't want to see that, so I hope that things will change.
And just a final one, this book is published in English. How much does it cost, and where can people find it? And we as young African journalists, what would be your advice to us? Because I don't even know if I've done the right thing here interviewing you, because having you here is like a honor to me, reading your profile, so interviewing you is the most difficult thing to do, because when you're talking to someone who knows what you are doing, or as soon as you start making your mistake, before you even go there, they know where you're ending. So it's going to be difficult. So what kind of advice will you give to us?
First of all, the book is on Amazon and is on Barnes & Noble's online. You can get it from there. And I've been making the rounds in London. I've been to Chatham House. I've been to London, several events in London. On Monday, I will be at University of Sheffield doing a presentation on the book. It's International Journalism Week this week in Sheffield, so we're going to be there doing some work on it. And I think when I started this work, I think my goal was to emulate my uncle. But over the years, I've been able to see that things are, the things around me were not good. So I think as young journalists, I think we need to look at our surroundings, look at the people that we mingle with, people that we go to school with, people that we talk to every day, people you see on the street, people you talk to in the bars, in the restaurant. What moves them? What drives them? What makes them uncomfortable? What's going on in their lives? Those kind of stories, people relate to those stories. I think if you have a vision about something you want to do in life, don't give up on it. Just keep pushing. And that's what I try to do. I try to push, push myself all the time. And hopefully that one day, you will succeed.
Well, thank you very much. It's a pleasure having you.
Thank you.
And to you, the viewers, thank you very much for watching. Until next week, that was African Voices. And from me and the rest of the team here, you have a good night.